Hi everyone, my name is Amanda and I'd like to welcome you to RGD's webinar panel, Must-Have Skills for Designers in 2018. Today's panel will be moderated by Lionel Kaduri, RGD, and the panelists are Tiffany daSilva and Ryan Price. Before we begin, a few reminders. If you have any questions, please submit them using the Questions tab in the webinar control panel. Also note that questions can take a while to come through the system and are more likely to be addressed if submitted during the panel discussion. Questions that do come through will be collected and answered by our panelists. We also invite you to interact with us on Twitter by tweeting during and after the broadcast using the hashtag RGDWeb. Welcome everyone and thank you for coming. If you're ready, I'll turn it over to you, Lionel.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Welcome everyone. I'm very pleased to have the honor of moderating today's discussion. My name is Lionel Kaduri. I'm a past president of the Registered Graphic Designers, and I also run my own design shop. So I'm a graphic designer by education, and I run my own shop since way back in the 1980s. I graduated and started my business. Today, my company is Context Creative. We're a studio of 24 people in downtown Toronto, and we work on full cross media. So a lot of the skills, of course, skills have changed a lot over the number of years, and they're always continuing to change. So I'm really keen to participate in this conversation with Ryan and Tiffany today. I'll now put it over to Ryan and Tiffany. You can introduce yourselves, a little bit about your background. Perhaps Tiffany, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I am not a designer, not even a little bit. So we'll start there. So Ryan's answering all those questions. I have been a marketer for the past 15 years officially, but the first time I ever did SEO was when I was 9 years old, and I built my first affiliate site at 11, not very designed well. And in the last 3 years, I've worked with a bunch of different startups, from Achievers to Shopify, worked on over 500 websites. I teach at McMaster for the SEO SEM program, and currently am a digital marketing consultant. And in the last 3 years, worked with 50 different startups here in the areas of search engine optimization, Google AdWords advertising, Facebook advertising, and conversion rate optimization, so CRO. So that's me in a nutshell. 27 usable hours in every day. Oh, also, I'm the founder of flowjo.co, FLOWJO.co, and it's basically marketing tips and tricks inside of a box that you can use if you're trying to grow your business. So there's, I'll be giving you a discount for that later on. That's it, I'm done, I promise.
Ryan?
So I started out in photography for when I went to school, and kind of fell into design as I moved through that. And I ended up at Sheridan College for what was called New Media at the time, because I knew I needed to learn more about typography, and they had a one-year program in New Media that offered a type course. So I took that and kind of fell in love with design, and specifically web design, from that program. It's now actually the web design program. They changed the name the year after I left. And since then, I've worked as the design director for Ryerson Student Newspaper. I worked there for 5 years, managing pre-press and making sure that everything printed successfully each week. And recently I've been working both at Mac and at Sheridan College as an educator. At Mac, I teach the fundamentals course for the web design certificate program. And at Sheridan, I teach in the visual and creative arts department, as well as the interaction design degree program. I freelance on the side, so I still do logos and brochures and business cards and things like that, but most of my time is focused on the web at this point.
Very interesting. You're both very busy people, I can tell. So I've got a few questions for us just to sort of seed our conversation, but feel free to answer, and if it stimulates other ideas, we can keep it, I think, fairly informal today. But my first question for you both is, in your opinion, what's the most important additional skill a graphic designer could add to his or her toolkit in order to provide excellent client service in the digital media world? Tiffany, maybe?
Okay. I know for me, and something that is so hard for me to find is someone, a designer who also knows how to do ads and landing pages, like really high, and not even highly converting ones. I mean, that would be great too if they actually knew conversion rate optimization, the psychology behind landing pages, but just being able to say, can you make landing pages for advertisements that are coming in from Facebook or Google? Like, can you do that? And a lot of them, people will say, no, I've never touched Unbounce. I've never touched, I've never done anything like that. And it's hard because I can say, especially startups who are taught that this is something that they need to be doing. Every webinar they're watching as marketers are seeing it, and there's that, they're asking designers to do it. And what surprises me is designers will just say, like, no, I'm not touching that. I don't know how to do it. So finding someone who's, number one, open to it, and number two, has a portfolio that they've actually done, it would just be huge.
So is it more like around some of the traditional skills, or design or writing, or what do you, or is it focused on? It sounds like many people know sort of some of the technology requirements, but maybe don't bring some of the other marketing insights.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times a marketer will be working with a designer and extending a lot of the content. So it's really just designing a page that kind of breaks all the rules that designers have been taught. No navigation, no like, all most important information is kind of on the top, but a really, really long page that goes on forever and looks all kind of awful. Trying to get people to, convert right away and then have a pop-up if they decide to leave. Like all these like weird little things that they're like, no, that breaks every user experience rule that I know. I think it's hard sometimes to kind of even wrap your brain around it. So just having someone with the openness to break some rules, and the willingness to kind of look at what's out there and try to copy some of the rules, even though it kind of hurts their soul to do it, and be data driven enough to know when to change and what to change.
Ryan, what are you seeing and encountering?
The one thing that I would say anyone should learn, not just necessarily designers, to get a leg up, is learning a little bit of code. I mean, for a graphic designer to try and build a design for a front-end developer to build out, they should have some understanding of the code, the CSS in particular, which is the style sheet that affects the look, but having some basic HTML. I mean, the system that we use at Mac and pretty much most post-secondary institutions, when we enter content for our students, it's all HTML driven. If you're creating a WordPress blog, it's HTML. And just having that knowledge and being able to customize your text beyond the bare minimum that the WYSIWYG editor gives you, I think even if you're in accounting, there's times and places where it would be a useful tool in your back pocket. So just having a little bit of that.
It's a pretty broad arc, it sounds like, everything from Tiffany, what you were mentioning, some of that has a lot more, I suppose, having a better understanding of the client and maybe the user and what their expectations are, and then it runs all the way through the being able to think about web architecture and how you're going to navigate all of those particular skills. Are there other aspects beyond some of the knowing a little bit of HTML, knowing a little bit more about the user experience? Are there other aspects that come in there that you touch upon?
I think ads. Like, I'm always surprised by designers not really taking part in creating ads and have never really done it before. I think, like, especially if you're just starting out and you're trying to build a nice portfolio, just trying to looking at different ads that are out there and even copying it. Like one of the first things that I did when I started doing marketing was I would take landing pages again, because it's what I do, and I would rewrite them, like actually word for word. And just so that I can have a feel for how something is being created, how it's being done, so I can slow my brain down, because as you can see, I talk really fast and I'm like always on the go. But like slowing myself down to actually understand what words they used, why they used it, and how exhausting it is, because sometimes they're really long, sometimes they'll be 2,000, 3,000 words, just going through the exhaustion of it. And you can feel the like almost yourself being weighed down by some of them, and being like, and sometimes I'm writing a landing page being like, maybe I should buy this product, like it sounds awesome, and like feeling the feelings that you feel when you're creating them. And I think that can also, it's a good, just that, I call it rip off and duplicate, R&D it, just being able to go through that yourself and see, like slow yourself down to understand why it might have worked is really important.
I think that's a great point, because, and I think you touch upon something that is also that inquisitiveness. You're always digging into things, and why would somebody do something this way? What's working? Why is it working? Why isn't something working? I think that's perhaps also something that's very, much a part. If you're a designer today, or if you're going to be a communicator, whatever media it is, you have to be able to always be willing to dig in deep. Are there some particular stories that you might be able to share with us, Ryan? Just your experience?
In what regards?
Sort of, you've clients who are looking for graphic design work, but maybe how it crosses over into web design, or even Tiffany, as you're sort of saying, maybe somebody says, hey, I just need something other design, but you really need somebody that can, has to dig deeper. They aren't asking you to be a marketing strategist, or they aren't asking you to be a writer, but do you have some real, stories where you've encountered that, where what the client was asking for maybe didn't fully comprehend all of the layers and the elements that were required?
Yeah, I mean, I think clients in general, they quite often they recognize there's two things that they need if they're starting a business. I try at least to deal with primarily small businesses, kind of one-person shops, so that I can kind of give them my full attention and they can give me theirs. And I also like the quick turnaround of a small website instead of a 1,000-page content management system. But quite often they come in and they know they need a logo, and they know they need a website. And if they come to me, they don't necessarily have the logo already, and they're trying to figure out where they can go. So more often than not, for new businesses, I end up doing both. And as we're working through the projects, quite often I hear, oh, I also need a brochure or a business card. So a lot of those materials kind of come up to the surface as they start to really realize what's invested in their time, or in their design needs. One of the first clients I ever worked with, something you were saying in the intro there was, I was working for a director for a TV series, and she had a website, but she wasn't happy with it and was trying to get a few things refined and fixed. So I went through multiple design iterations, getting new information every time, and part of it was definitely on me. I was fresh out of school. I didn't know how to pull the information I needed out of the client effectively at that point. And we had agreed to 25 hours of work, and at 25 hours I said, we're at our time. She said, well, we have nothing to show for any of this. All we have is a few designs. I'm like, yeah, we have several very different designs, and that's taken 25 hours to get to this point. And she said, well, why does it take so long? So I compared it back to the industry, and I said, well, your show runs for 44 minutes on TV, right? She said, yeah. I said, so what's that take you? An hour, hour and a half? Once you've got the idea, you just throw everything together. And she looked at me like I was the dumb one. She didn't pick up on the point I was trying to make. But I think quite often the client doesn't necessarily recognize that you've got to build in that SEO. You've got to make sure that you've got all of your marketing terms properly, that it's well copywritten, that it's coded, that it meets provincial and national, potentially international laws. So there's a lot of things that they don't get. They just see the website's 5 pages. So I need 5 pages of work, and they can churn out 5 pages in Word in an afternoon, right? And there's a disconnect there quite often.
Yeah. So sometimes people don't know, clients don't know they don't fully understand perhaps the process, and, that there are a number of elements that you have to focus on. And, and Tiffany, even to your early example, when you sort of said, I can imagine a client coming in and sort of saying, I just need an ad. I just need a web ad. I just need a landing page or something.
Story of my life.
Story of all of our lives.
Yeah, yeah.
It's how much for just a little ad?
Yeah. So what would you suggest? Like, what have you learned how you counter that so that you can set expectations from the outset and maybe highlight, the number of steps that you have to go through and why there's going to be certain costs associated before you even start the project? Is that, within that tool set and the skills that designers have to be prepared for?
Oh, for sure. I can kind of tell you from being on both sides of it. When I every day, like the big thing that I have to deal with is, especially with people on Facebook ads need to be changed regularly, like once a week, sometimes twice a week if it has a lot of traction, a lot of people. And I need lots of ads to work with, because you can't just create one ad and hope that it works and tell yourself like, this is the best that this could be. Like, of course not. There's like 20 ads that you need to make. You throw it up on the board based on already best practices that you should know. And you are seeing what works and what doesn't for certain target audiences. And sometimes when I'm working with clients, they don't kind of understand that process. And a lot of the times, even when I'll have a designer next to me and I could see the designer struggling to try to explain that whole, things take time, things take a little bit longer, we might have to do a few iterations, I kind of tend to stop them. One of the things that I've learned just from doing this every day and having to sell myself, which I don't like selling myself, but what I've learned is don't sell the details. The second that you say something that, like, if a designer starts going on and saying, well, we're going to create this ad and this ad's going to look like this, if you say one thing that goes against the expectations of the person you're talking to, they're going to go, oh my God, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. I'm going to have to do all this work. And they're like already gone. And so I like to be vague. I say, first of all, this is going to be a lot more money than you think it's going to be. It's going to be, I start padding it right away. So before we're even having this conversation, this is how much this is going to be. And I pad it by like 30% just in case. Like, a client will love you if it comes out less, but like at least get them to say yes to the big thing, and be the type of person that will give them less if it does take less, for sure. Secondly, once you've done that, you start saying, okay, well, I'm going to create this many ads. Let's say it's three to 5 ads, and they're starting to ask you for details. Like, what are these ads going to look like? What is it going to be about? You know what? I'm going to talk to you more on a later date, but right now let's just iron out the details. And I think having those conversations are really important, because you will get lost. Like, I've gone through in the beginning, I used to go through so many designers because they're like, they don't understand my vision. They don't understand what we're trying to go after. It's going to be so much work. And it's like, well, it was a 5-minute conversation. So we are basing all this on a 5-minute conversation. You haven't even seen that person's work. So that's kind of the one aspect, is just figure out the dollars and cents before, be vague, get that portion out, and then start working with the person to try to understand what they do. Now, on the other side, I create Flojo. Flojo is very design heavy. At the end of this year, I'm going to have 10 different products, all nice, like, where design, it's the idea of these products are they sit on your desk and they look really cool. And so everyone that passes by a Flojo box go, oh, what is this? They immediately open it and they play. To do that, I have a certain vision in my head, and I am the worst. I will say I'm the worst at trying to explain what is in my head. And for people like me that are struggling, some designers have done different things. The designer that I think worked with the best with me said, okay, these are 4 different designs here. Like, take it home, look at it, think about it before, and then come back to me in like a week. Like, let yourself think about it. And when they came back, I went, oh my God, this isn't what I want. This is what I wanted. And during that time, I was able to figure it out. What other designers have tried to do with me is let me sit down with you and let's build it together. And for someone like me, I'm just going to keep saying yes and yes and yes. And then a week later, I'm going to go, oh my God, that wasn't what I wanted. And I like am panicked, and they've done all this work already. And we've gone down this path, and I've even approved things, but I didn't have enough time to let it simmer. So I think if you're working with someone like me, and if it's going to be like a product, like an ad is one thing. An ad, I always say when someone says, I don't think this is going to work, I'm always like, well, we haven't tested it yet. Let's throw it up there and see. But if it's a product that you know someone has to buy, I have to buy 2,000 of these units at a time. I'm going to be like absolutely crazy about what it looks like, because I'm going to have to stare at these things inside my house for like until they sell. So for people like me who seem to be a little squeamish, who seem to not really understand, who say to you right off the bat, this isn't my strong suit, like those should be red alerts to you to say, okay, let's take a step back, process. Tell me, like, we'll start with the Pinterest board that has all these things that you like, fine, and I'll create some designs from you from there, but then come back to me.
Ryan, what about you? Like, as far as processes and setting expectations, how do you approach?
I think there's definitely some client education involved. I always joke that I spend a lot of time scaring my clients away by teaching them what they actually need to know about the process. Because like Tiffany said, you put that big number out there and then you bring it back slowly for them so that they can at least buy in. And just getting them to understand, like, you have a car, you have to just trust your mechanic that they're doing right by you. And I think it's the same for marketers and designers, is you've got to trust their expertise. So educating the client, helping them build up that trust. And as much as trust is important, I think deceiving them to some extent is helpful at times too. I try and teach my students that, like with a style sheet, you change the color of the headings from pink to blue, that literally takes as long as it takes to type those words out, and the entire site has all new colored headings. If you do that on the phone with a client when they ask for a revision like that, and they see it instantaneously, they've now got this concept that everything that a web designer can do is an instantaneous action. So you're no longer valued, you're literally just pushing content out for them. You have no expertise, you're just typing. And so I tell my students, like, yes, we all know that that took very little effort, but don't let the client know that, because then everything takes very little effort. And sometimes the easy things, or the seemingly easy things, are what take the most time and energy in the code. So make that significant change, but don't publish it till the end of the day, so the client thinks it took you a little longer than it should have. So that there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors involved to kind of build that illusion of trust. And once they're good and you know that they trust you, then you can let them in on the secrets. But there's that fine line that you got to walk.
Yeah. I do the same thing even for myself. Every client, like I never do the thing that they want me to do that day, possibly like I wait till the next morning. And it's not because I'm trying to be a jerk, but I know that in the future, there's going to be a time when I'm so busy that I won't be able to do it. And I want them to have this kind of, they're not at that point going to think, oh my God, she has this other client, I'm not important anymore. It's just, you're training your client to understand that things aren't instantaneous. And unless it's such a red alert, I know that it's a complete emergency and it needs to be done, because then they'll know that you'll drop everything when it's important, but you'll have to wait when it's not. And I think that's just a skill that it's the best way to stop yourself from having issues later on when you just can't get to things. You will eventually get so busy you don't know what's going on. So.
Yeah. One thing that I've found, and it plays in even with, because what you're creating, you're from a technological standpoint, from an understanding of design principles, marketing principles, a lot of times you're going to have areas of expertise that exceed obviously your client's level of understanding. At the same time, they're going to have visions and expectations, and they know their elements about their business that I think you have to be humble about, that they know better than you do about certain things. And it's sort of that, you know, finding that collaborative ground. And I've always felt that, you know, your clients value you most when they walk away at the end of a project being better informed, understanding design, understanding something about the web more than they did before. And that should be a pleasurable experience, that they, you know, that they absorb something and they'll feel more confident going forward on, you know, on future projects. And so I've, you know, years ago, starting out as a one-man shop and building along with bigger and bigger clients over the years, I found that the thing that one of the knacks is to be able to explain the steps that you're going to follow. And before you do anything, find out what the budget is, even before I even create a proposal. And sometimes clients can be very hesitant. They sort of think, if I tell them how much it's going to cost, they're just going to take all of that money. And I always figure, I'm going to propose what we are going to do and the steps we're going to follow in order to make the best use of that budget. And you know, Tiffany, what you were mentioning, you know, you touched upon that thing about how you might use Pinterest or you might do something, you know, just establishing before you start designing or creating anything, you know, finding some techniques so that you can get the client, so that you can start uncovering what's in their mind. What do they think they want to have? Do you agree with that? Do you have anything else to add? So we, you know, I find whether the project is big or small, just having that first step to try to figure out, oops, I hope we didn't just lose things.
Yeah, it's just me here. Who's not?
Uh-oh.
There we go.
Oh, good.
Okay, phew. I thought it was just a one-man show there for a while. I panicked. One thing that I will say that I do that has been really useful for me is for every audit I do, every kind of work that I do for my client, I create a video right after. And it started as a way not only to educate them on what I did and some of the, like, I really believe that people should know like what they're getting themselves into. But another reason that kind of came later that I realized was that when someone gets my audit and they watch the video, first of all, I don't have to hear from them for about a week or two because it's going to take them forever to actually watch. They're not going to start asking questions right away because they go, okay, the answer's probably in that video, so I'm not going to bother them yet. I'll wait. Secondly, when the questions do come back to me, they're not the basic questions anymore. Now I've educated them enough, so they're asking me more educated questions. And third of all, they're now seeing me in like how you described. They're seeing me as someone that they could trust, because I have given them all the secrets of what I did. Like I'll show them how I got certain things. I'll show them where I found certain information. I'll even create that type of video, a small one for the developer or whoever they're working with. And what's happened is a lot of startups or people that are the one-man show, they'll use those videos as a training guide for everyone that's coming in. So automatically now you're becoming like a thought leader for all those people coming in. They might go to different organizations and they remember your face, they remember you walking them through stuff. So I would suggest, no matter what you're working on, I use Camtasia. I just do a quick one, if it's something small, 1-2 minute thing. If I'm just showing them, I do like my reports every month. It's me talking to them and then giving the reports. Or if I'm doing a big project, to walk through the whole thing with them so that they know.
Brian, do you have anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I guess in some ways it's similar to the concepts of putting together style guides for the client. Kind of gives them not only the technical information, but a bit of history and background about the design decisions and why you should make a headline a certain typeface with a certain color and a certain font size and so on, and how that ties into the system as a whole. Just gives the client a little more room to be comfortable when they leave, that they've got information and they don't have to memorize it. So like we've all built them up to be more informed and be better clients at the end of the day, but now they can walk away and feel like even if they forget things, they can come back to the videos or come back to the style guides and different materials and refresh themselves so that when they do have that next design project, that they're ready to go and hit the ground running.
You know, with all of these things that we're touching upon, how realistic is it, do you think, or how should designers be working? You know, is it realistic that a graphic designer is going to know this scope of you know topics that we're touching upon, and in particular, you know, do you find, especially for you, Ryan, you know, because I think you were talking about some traditional design and having that understanding, so maybe some people are coming in more from, you know, an education where they understand graphics maybe a little bit more, but they haven't really gotten into website, let alone you know, website design, let alone, you know, SEO and SEM, and you know, so many other layers of understanding. You know, is this a realistic ask, or how are things changing today in the market to accommodate this?
I mean, yes and no. It it's there's no perfect answer. I think it's good for a graphic designer to have a good sense of web design if they plan on going into web design in their business. When I worked in marketing, I had to code out HTML emails all the time, which is an awful process. It's a very different beast from the average website. And I could tell when I got a design comp sent in whether the designer had built a website before or not, just by how complex it was going to be to code out. Like first glance, 10 seconds, I knew whether they'd done any coding or web design before. So I think having some understanding of it is good. But at the same time, as a web designer, there is a lot of stuff I don't know. In the interaction design program at Sheridan, I'm always telling my first year students, like, by the time you graduate, you'll know way more than I do. But what I do know, I will still know better than you do, because I've found what interests me, I've found what I'm good at, and that's my niche. Now, I do dabble in other things. I've been playing around with 3D printing and other things like that to get a better sense of those technologies, because one day things like that, virtual reality, augmented reality, all of these different media will come in and be overlap with what I'm doing. So to have an understanding of that is great. I don't need to be an expert in any of it, but having some knowledge, it's the same as when you deal with your client. Regardless of their industry, you need to learn a bit about their industry to successfully design for them, right?
Yes, and if you were starting to, you know, expand you've come out from your 3 or 4 year design program, and now you're being confronted with many of these realities. Have you found, have the tools, are there platforms out there now? Like, where are things going? Are there, you know, are there ways that that you're seeing the industry, or sort of the, even the software side of things, changing to sort of narrow that gap, or for maybe to accelerate the level of understanding that a young designer might gain?
I mean, we still use Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign for a lot of stuff. And maybe that's because the industry is still relatively young, and a lot of the senior web designers are people that came out of print, so they know InDesign really well, and it's a tool that they're just going to keep falling back on when they need to find a new solution to a problem. But there's apps like Sketch, which is kind of, I guess, a hybrid between Photoshop and Illustrator, that is making significant ground on the market that Photoshop currently dominates. I haven't had a need to get into it myself a whole lot, but I keep seeing it come up left, right, and center as a good solution to a lot of problems. So, I mean, it's changing, but at the same time, when it comes down to the code, you can open up a text editor and write good code. It doesn't necessarily inhibit or provide you benefit to have the latest and greatest code editor. So I don't know. To answer your question, I don't know.
Tiffany, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say, going back to the question before this, where you're looking for, you know, if someone should go niche or broad, I think I had to face the same question myself. When I had started out, like, obviously, like, I had done this SEO thing when I was a kid, but I didn't know it was called SEO until I was sitting as a secretary in a web development office, and they were talking about ranking for something, and I'm listening to them going, wait, this doesn't make sense, guys, you need to do this, this, and this inside the code and this, and they all stopped and looked at me and they're like, well, how do you know SEO? And I'm like, I don't know what SEO is, but you got to do these things, like you're doing it all wrong. So needless to say, I got a promotion that day and got moved out of the secretary chair. But I realized I knew this thing, I knew it well, went into a company that's all they did. And then 3 months later, I got let go. And I was like, oh my God, I just found out that I do this very technical niche thing. Now what do I do? And I went into sales, went into email marketing. Ugh, I can't even, that was like my hell. And then for the next year, I kept begging to come back to the company. Like I wrote them every single week, asking them if they had any openings. And finally, a year later, I got in there. They sat down. They go, okay, we'll hire you for SEO. And I went, no, I want to be on the PPC side because those guys never got let go last time. So I want to be on that side. And I had decided at that point that it wasn't going to help me. It was more of a survival thing, that I couldn't just stay in SEO. I had to differentiate myself by trying everything that I possibly could. So over the next 10 years, every couple of years, I would switch. I go from SEO, I did pay-per-click advertising in AdWords, then I switched to Facebook. I was even a celebrity gossip writer that hacked Google News all day and had to write 12 articles a day, every single day on like Charlie Sheen and James Franco, which worst job ever. And then I went into putting the two together in a startup, so SEO and SEM, and then doing something completely different with conversion rate optimization at Shopify, only to then come back, go to an agency as a director of digital strategy where I got to work on 60 different companies and using everything I had just learned. So for me, I decided early on, I'm going to be a full stack marketer. I'll have my pillars, which it's kind of the T. They say the one thing or two things that you're really good at, and then I'm going to spread myself across to email, to all these different things. And I think, and I know people that haven't done that. I know people that went straight into SEO and they're the best SEOs I've ever met, and I go to them when I need help. And they make a lot of money doing so. So I think you need to decide early on what you're going to do, but really like actually go full in. So don't say I'm going to do this full stack thing and then you it's been 3 or 4 years, you haven't really switched, so now you're kind of good at two things, like, and that's all right, but just keep moving. Or I'm going to be this niche person, but I'm going to read every article, I'm going to start creating videos for myself, I'm going to start guest posting on things, and that's how you become niche and an expert in that field. So I think it's a decision you have to make early on, and go from there. Follow your gut.
To add to that, one of the things that I heard Tiffany saying was, like, as she went back and forth, they're very different things. And I think as someone, if you specialize, you still have a firm understanding of the concepts that cross the different areas of expertise. When I have a client that comes and says, hey, can you do this? I say yes, whether I've done it before or not, because I know that I know enough about the industry and about the things that fall within my wheelhouse that I can reach outside of that. And it might take me a little more than the best expert, but I can do it. And I'll bill accordingly. I'm not going to charge them for my learning time necessarily, but I never say no to a client when they ask, can you do this? Unless it's so far outside of design that I go, no, I can't sew a shirt for you. Sorry, I can't help you with your product line there. But otherwise, the answer is always yes, because specialty or not, you can reach outside and be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, well, a couple of great points there, I think. Thank you. Because in particular, Tiffany, you even touched upon this aspect that we still live in an industry or work in an industry where a lot of people can still get very deep into particular elements, that we could touch upon any one thing, and you could go deep, and then become the best in the industry, and answer that particular niche. And on the other hand, we probably work in more collaborative environments than ever before, whether that's in a physical location or whether we're just as we're connecting here today. You know, there are other ways, but I suppose that's part of it, is understanding how you want to tackle a problem for a client, and understand whether you want to surround yourself and have a little bit of a group that you know who you can call upon in order to fill in these pieces of the puzzle, or how much you want to. Ryan, you said it, that you need to know enough as to how the pieces fit together, and you know what the elements are, but perhaps you don't always have to be the one that can delve in and do everything on your own. Are you finding that? Do you find you know, that aspect about either working in teams, or are you encountering more people sort of that one person shops, where you know enough of everything that you can keep it, you know, in your own studio, or is that changing, you know, the way that people answer client needs?
Well, for me, I know, like when I started my own consulting company, it just happened to be that a friend of mine had started a Slack group of just digital marketers. And over time, a lot of us have gone on our own as well. And you think that we'd be super competitive, and you think that we'd be like after each other's jobs, but you'll see the same people get, oh, you know, I got asked for this company, and we'll all kind of talk about it. And you know who's really good and who would be the right person for that job. And I think the more that you're open, and the more that you're willing to call upon your friends, like one of the things that I realized early on is because I had already kind of gone higher and higher in my career, as I got higher, I started being more scared to ask questions, because I didn't want people to be like, oh my God, that's a dumb question. Like, how are you sitting there and you don't know this question? So one of the most freeing things that happened when I finally like walked out of my job and joined this group of people, who a lot of them I used to manage at this agency, I started going right back to SEO basics and asking the most basic questions. And the surprising thing that I found was I'm asking these questions and people are still debating over them. So I don't know why I thought I was so dumb, you know, for years over not asking this question. There was a reason. It was because there was a million different ways to look at the same problem. And so now when I hit any kind of problem, if it's especially technical SEO is really, if you don't have a strong coding background, it can get really confusing. So I call upon those guys or girls within the group, and they're there to answer those questions, and I become smarter as a result. And I'm was the person from up until that point always doing it on my own, always trying to learn as much as I can. But now I'm seeing the benefit in, you know, you feel a little like, I'm asking that question, I'm a little nervous as to if they're all going to think I'm stupid. But I realize that other people, you know, are learning stuff too within the group. And the group started, I think, with 10 of us. It's now like 60 people. And it's probably the greatest part of my day is learning new stuff from them.
You know, and on that, you know, and you touched upon, you can never, even the stuff that you thought you knew, it's always still evolving, or you can get that greater level of insights. But I'm wondering again, sort of like, you know, Tiffany, even as you described it, the company you were working at was trying to get into SEO, and they really didn't have that much of an understanding, because that was so new still at that level of understanding at that point in time. And it seems like it's always changing. There's always something on the cusp of, you know, where clients are going, where the industry is going, where technology is going. Is there something, you know, that you would touch upon? Are we touching on all the things that you're seeing that you think are the trends? Like, if I knew that, I would be 2 steps ahead of most of my peers, and I'm just going to rocket to the top like you did, Tiffany. You're gonna get pulled out of that secretary chair.
Yeah, take me out of there. I think being willing to start looking at what social media networks are doing, especially in terms of paid. You have video that's becoming so big, and the best video people I know are people that started off in photography or in design, because they just know how to make something look great. They do the overlays, they do the titles. There's so many pieces of the good videos that are on Instagram, that I think that if designers kind of jumped on that, they would be kind of ahead of the game. I also think, again, not just ads, but all those type of photos that you put up in Instagram, if you look at them, a lot of them are the motivational type of pictures that we all hate, but we all like in our private lives. And people are going on Canva to like create them really quickly. But even though I'm doing that, and I do that for myself, I know that I would love a designer who could just, create a bunch of different ones and like do stuff that they love and be able to illustrate and those type of things. So I think if there is stuff that you love to do, if you're an illustrator, but you feel like you're being stuck doing like web design, there's still illustration work that can be done within Instagram, within Facebook, that you can carve your own little niche. And I would say that if you don't know how to do that and carve your own little niche, but you want to do this one thing, I would listen or read Gary V's Crush It and Crushing It, those 2 books, because he will actually walk through. And I was a big thing of like, I'm not going to read his books or whatever, he's too much for me. But actually, I went through the last couple weeks and read them both within 2 weeks, and it just gave me a solid plan of like, oh, I can't believe I didn't look at it that way. I can't believe I haven't done these things. And there's so much room there for designers to really jump on some of the social media trends that are going on and do stuff, because every company needs it, and no companies are doing it right now because they don't even know how to use their designer in that way.
Yeah, to jump on what Tiffany was saying, I think having a good sense of video or just animation, understanding time and motion and how those things interplay. Designers all know how to lay out a page and understand space and proportion and aspects like that. But adding time into that aspect, I think, changes the field quite a bit. And in web design, you've got videos becoming full screen backgrounds. CSS animations are being added in. And those subtle little interactions can be very different, even if they last half a second, just in the way that we create that animation. So more and more with my students, I'm getting them to experiment, go back to like old Saul Bass trailers and watch Psycho for the opening credits, things like that, so that they start to see how this works. And then once they've watched it, put it on mute and watch it again and see how it's different, because all of these things interact with each other. And we're just, as the technology gets better and our computers get faster, we're adding more and more of this stuff in. So I think designers need to have a good sense of that.
That's right. I can certainly echo, we see that in our studio. We know, that all of these things keep on changing. And that's a really, I think in particular, like that whole trend for animation and integrating video started a number of years ago. And I know, graduates out of York Sheridan and, various programs that's, they had some special edge. And so they had that general enough understanding, but then they had these other new insights that even as junior people joining a studio, they had something special that, that set them apart from the rest of the team. Otherwise, hey, it's all lifelong learning, right? We all keep on encountering this. The other area that I'm sort of seeing, we do a lot of different types of reports, and for many years that was still lagging a little bit more of what people's expectations were. It was staying in print, where you're doing a lot of infographics and charts and stuff that is all drawing on data. And the design industry itself, whether you're a web shop or what have you, was kind of doing their thing, but there was getting to be an increasing gulf in between, say, what Bloomberg News was doing, or maybe some really good online entities were starting to use data and driving that through, in a design experience at the same time. And just touching on that one area, I'm seeing a similar trend and demand for that as I saw in motion and in integrating video that started a number of years ago, to dig in even deeper and understand how to use data sets and then create a whole narrative and a design experience that is drawing on data. I think that there's a lot of change going there. One of the things, though, that I'd love to hear from you as well is if you're at school, which is still, everybody's in school learning it, how do you find the school curriculum is preparing people? Are there areas that are going in? Are there, like, how do you stay on top and where do you get that next level of learning? Is that something that you have to do outside of school, or are the school programs changing fast enough to?
I think right now, one of the big things is that the training that you can do outside of school is becoming better than the training you can get inside. I know when I was developing the SEO, SEM course, One of the things that I think people found with my course was that it was just so much harder than they were expecting. Like I'm not, I will say right away, I do a lot of homework, I do a lot of hands-on stuff. I want people to walk away and, you know, a year later look back and say, oh, thank God I actually did this. I know what people are talking about. Because that's what the kind of training that people are paying for outside of school. Like they'll go, even me, I did my MBA with a specialty in e-commerce, and halfway through I had to go to the school and be like, this isn't really e-commerce. Like and they ended up closing the program down because what they were teaching was so old by that point. This was already like 6 or 7 years ago, that it just didn't even make sense anymore. And so being able to, I think, like constantly be changing the information that you're giving, providing hands-on training, that type of work is so important. Like even in the SEM course that I teach, they actually do a simulation with Google AdWords or Bing. It's actually using Bing data, where they have to create their own campaigns. They have to compete with each other on which campaigns are going to do better, so they can get a feel for that. And for me, all I'm teaching them, and I say that, I'm teaching you the emotional roller coaster that comes with having to do this work. Because if you're going to experience that emotional roller coaster the first day you step into your company, you're going to quit being like, oh, I can't do that. Like I just used real people's money and I just lost it. Like it's like going to Las Vegas with you know, some guys like $1,000 and tells you to double it. Like it's just it's incredible. So I think that schools right now, a lot of them should be relooking at their curriculum and making sure that they are comparative to some of the teachable stuff that are out there, the Udemy courses that are out there. And I will say 90% of the courses out there are probably absolute crap. Like I've gone through a lot of them myself and just been like, okay, that did not help. But like there are ones out there that will teach you so much more than some of the school programs. And I think that schools need to find those people and make sure that they're the ones that are teaching in universities right now.
I mean, in college and university, the curriculum's mandated, right, by the ministry. So you can't turn on a dime if something in the industry necessarily changes drastically. But I mean, the courses are often set up to be concise but vague, so that you can have that wiggle room. And if something changes, then you can change with it within a certain amount of space. I know in the courses I teach, like I do a lot of fundamentals of web design, and things don't really change a lot at the intro level, but I still go back and double check that everything I'm doing is still the best practice, the standard that we're running with this week, and double checking those things. And if there's a technology that's better, then I try to incorporate it. Sometimes I'm a little behind the ball because I've got to learn those things too, right? But I think we do a pretty good job of keeping pace with the industry. Every now and then something disruptive comes into the field and kind of throws you for a curveball, but for the most part, I think the schools are doing a good job.
Are there particular sources beyond RGD who's does its best to keep us all sort of working and understanding and learning together? Are there do you have mentors or other sources that you personally like that go there? This is just fabulous. There's gold over in particular resources.
I know for me, one of the ones I've been looking at her stuff for years in terms of writing, because I think writing is a skill everyone needs, is Copy Hackers. And she was one of the people that I used to actually rewrite all her landing pages, all her ads, all her emails. She has email templates that she just like kind of gives away for free. And I would literally just rewrite them, and hoping that, it would just kind of get ingrained into what I'm doing. I also look at sites like growthhackers.com that kind of bring together a lot of different news from marketing sources to find the person, because sometimes it's not just one person that I find. For me, I get my kind of inspiration from elsewhere. Like for me, when I look at like Rachel Maddow, I'm obsessed. All my friends know I'm obsessed with Rachel Maddow. I watch her every night. MSNBC. I like stop I'll be at a bar and be like, I've got to go home. It's Rachel Maddow time. But the biggest reason is because she can tell a story from beginning to end in such a way that she'll take a story, the final, put it in the beginning. She'll kind of go off. She'll be talking about the Byzantine Empire when she's talking about like something that's happening today. And she's taught you so much about history in like an hour. And I've told myself that I want to be that person for marketing. And so I use that as my background constantly. So for me, it's look for those sources in other places that you just feel drawn to and see how it applies to what you're doing. I was listening to this podcast this morning called Unthinkable, and it's about a guy who writes about, you know, how to disrupt your career, how to do different things. And what he had said was his whole show and the way that it's done was based on Anthony Bourdain's shows. Like he used to actually watch and sketch out how those shows were done, and he made it apply to what he was doing. So you never know where that inspiration can come from. Even Flojo, the name Flojo came from Baby's Got Back. Like I was listening to Baby's Got Back, heard Flojo, I'm like, oh, that's such a cool name. Then Flojo came out with what could Flojo be, and then it ends up being these like cool things that stayed on your desk and whatever. So you never know where that inspiration is gonna come from, but when you do find it, just catch on and see how you can use it to your own industry or own brand.
Yeah, I'd say listening to podcasts is a great way of kind of pulling information out and getting ideas that you don't necessarily have in your inner circles. But for me, one of the best things in Hamilton has been a group called Software Hamilton. And it's a bunch of other designers and developers, and they run conferences. I mean, as great as Design Thinkers is, it can be cost prohibitive, especially for young designers. But the conferences that this group runs are $25 for a full day session. They bring in food, there's an after party with free drinks, and I mean, that's worth the price of admission there. And I always come out of there learning some really interesting things. I also leave there going, I have no idea what that second presentation was about, way over my scope for this particular topic, but I get to learn new things, and I get to talk to the people that are in my neighborhood working on the same stuff as me. And every city is the same. Like every major city in Canada has these different groups, right? You just got to find them. Even the young entrepreneurs out there, you might get in touch with a bunch of business people and meet other marketers and pull those people into your network. And when that client calls you up and says, hey, do you do SEO? As a designer, you go, yeah, I do. And you hire the person that you met at that meeting 2 months ago and bring them in as part of your team for that project.
Those are excellent tips. I know I think we're wrapping up at around 1, if I'm not mistaken. Any last closing thoughts that you'd like to put out there?
I will say that in about 2 minutes, once I actually create the design code, if you go on flojo.co, FLOWJO.co, and use the discount code FLOJO45, you can get 45% off of the one of the boxes. So please feel free if it's something that you're interested in growing a business or looking for different tips that marketers like me use to help companies grow, then go for it.
Excellent, thank you.
I'd say for the student designers out there and the recently graduated designers, take advantage of the faculty. Ask questions that aren't being taught in the classroom, and when you've graduated and you've got a question about something, go back and ask them. Like I have students email me all the time, and I'm happy to give them my thoughts on the topic. Sometimes they disagree with me after being in the industry, but I mean, there's so much information that we can impart, but we can only teach so much within the confines of what the course is. So if you have questions and you're not learning the little nuggets that you want to know about, ask and you'll get answers.
Now, Ryan, just before we wrap up, I know you went back and decided to do a master's. And did you find that experience was different because then you're in with you know, people have got a little bit more life experience that are doing that, perhaps?
It definitely gave me a greater appreciation for the efforts of the faculty. Um, I, when I did my undergrad, if I wasn't happy with the quality of the teaching, I felt like they didn't know what they were doing. They weren't good teachers. And maybe that was the case for one or two of them, who knows. But when I went back and did my master's, if there was a class that kind of just wasn't fantastic, I cut them some slack because I knew how hard they were working on it. And sometimes it was just me, it wasn't them. I had a stronger appreciation for them, and it made me want to work harder to succeed within the class for their purposes. So
That's
Yeah,
great.
so
Thank you very
a
much.
lot of, yeah, thank you so much, everyone. A lot of really great perspectives from each of you. And I just want to thank Lionel, Tiffany, and Ryan for taking this time to join the panel today and answering all these questions. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you,
us.
Amanda.
yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye-bye,
and just
everyone.
before we sign off, a quick reminder, RGD organizes regular free virtual events for our members on June 28th. Join Jean-Pierre Lacroix, RGD, as he explores Desire by Design. And on July 12th, Dan Miller will discuss designing for stigma and how to address these types of problems to enable design solutions. So visit rgd.ca for a full list of upcoming webinars and other events. And this concludes today's webinar. Thank you all for your participation.
Thanks.
Thank you.